Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to not LinkedIn, to Interviewing Wednesdays. This is our special guest interviewing speaker series during the month of April. It's April 14th, 2021. And normally today would be the last day to get your taxes done, but you've got an extra month or two. All right, for those people on Zoom, if you have any questions, please, as soon as you think about them, put them in the chat box. And for those people watching on Facebook right now, please just put them in the comment field, any questions you have, and I will be sure to get those questions answered for you. I'm monitoring the Facebook feed and the Zoom feed. Please note this event is being recorded and is currently live on Facebook. The recording will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and on the Career USA YouTube channel for others to view in the future. By participating in this event, and if you post a comment in the chat box or have your microphone or camera on, you give consent for your comment, name, and picture to appear. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Morris. Back in 2008, I started Career DFW as a website to help those in the Dallas-Fort Worth area find hopefully everything they need to know about their job search in one place. In 2012, I started CareerUSA.org to help people outside the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I've written a book called What I've Learned About Your Job Search That You May Not Know. It's available on Amazon. Since 2007, I've been facilitating and leading the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group. The group's been around since the late 1990s, and I'll tell you about our upcoming programming at the end of this session. And since 2017, I've been a member of the practice interview team, and you'll hear about that in just a second. Mark is not with us today. He leads the practice interview team. Mark and Walt actually teach the 13-part interviewing workshop that will start up again in May. Mark's taken the day off, and so I'll tell you a little bit about the practice interview team. This is a great way to practice your interviewing. You need to send a resume and a job description. Well, I don't have a job description. Find any job description out on the internet that you would be interested in, and you go, that's my job. Send that job description along with your resume and your available times to dallaspickcrew@gmail.com. You see it listed right down there in the lower right-hand corner of the business card. And Mark will schedule a interview with you. They've gotten, I think they're doing 5 this week. They've got, I know they have some time available next week if you need to. Don't wait until you have an interview, because most likely they're not going to schedule something that quickly. Practice now. Practice now, practice often, because the better you become, the easier it will be. You won't have to think about things. It really is really beneficial. It is a panel interview. You'll be interviewed by 3 different people. You'll get a copy of the video afterwards. It is on Zoom, so they're able to do them all days of the week right now. Usually, if you were to send in your request today, it would probably be Friday or Monday when they would actually schedule the interview. So if you're interested, please send an interview. Send your resume and job description to the dallaspickcrew@gmail.com. The other half of the Walt and Mark show is Walt Glass. Walt, are you with us this afternoon?
You did such a good job. Can you do mine too?
Sorry, you're with us. You'd have to take the day off for me to do it.
Rats. Okay. I think I'm going to take the rest of the afternoon off, starting right now. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, Tony. For the rest of you, Tony is a member of the I Want to Help Job Seekers Club, and also does it free of charge. And you might want to pick up his book, Acing the Interview, which has a lot of aces of diamonds. Those diamonds are inside that book, a lot of things, a lot of questions, a lot of things to consider. You might want to pick that up. Anyway, what do? I like to help people with interviewing skills as well, but I do it a little differently. I do the fundamentals. It's like in basketball, if you can't dribble and you can't shoot, why play the game? So we need to learn how to dribble and shoot. In golf, you got to learn how to hit the ball. If you can't hit the ball, how are you going to do anything? You got to know how to do the fundamentals of just about anything that you're involved in. And so you do the same thing in interviewing. So I like to try to teach the differentiation, how we can do that, how can we differentiate ourselves positively from those other candidates, and how can we sell ourselves? So everybody pretty much understands that an interview is a sales situation and that we're selling ourselves. And when I ask people, what does that really mean? I get these long pauses. And so I suggest that we are selling who we are, what we do, and how we can help. Many interviews are on the I do side, a little bit maybe on the characteristics and soft skills guys, but I really don't see a whole lot of selling the value that we bring to the job. So that's the I help side. So I like to help with the fundamentals of doing that. I like to ask you questions out of the 11 basic categories of questions so that you can practice those. How do you handle types of questions? What kind of strategies, option, approaches, structures that you might be able to use in responding to that type of question? And responding always depends on three things. What's the question, who's asking it, and where are you in the process? So that's what the workshop does. It's free. A lot of details are on my LinkedIn page. You can register by sending me an email at my Yahoo email address and ask for some availability dates. It's a very informal process. It's a learning interview more than a mock interview where you're going to be graded, whatever. We're just trying to improve our skills and be different from those other candidates in a very positive and memorable way. So send me an email. I would love to put you on the registration and get you schedules so we can have a little bit of fun. And I call it learning without squirming.
Thank you very much, Walt.
Hey, Jeff,
Well,
Jeff,
yes.
can I interrupt for a second and give Walt a unsolicited endorsement? I did that session yesterday with him. It was excellent. I learned a great deal. Walt was great in the whole session. I enjoyed the person that my colleague that I went through the process with, and I can't recommend it enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, Walt, I guess you need to send Stephen his refund check now.
Well, Stephen gets a 25% referral bonus.
Yeah, and 25% divided by 0 is still 0.
Very good. Thank you very much. All right. Well, for the month of April, Walt and Mark are taking the month off. Mark actually is taking the day off. And so we've lined up 4 outstanding speakers to fill in for the Wednesdays. So hopefully you'll join us for the next couple of weeks. You'll get a different point of view. You'll hear a little bit something different every week about interviewing. Today, Tony Beshara is with us. Tony owns and runs Babbage & Associates, an outstanding recruiting firm here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I got my last job I got through Babbage & Associates. I really, when you hear about certain firms, it's like there's the good ones and there's ones you're not really sure of. If you can find something at Babbage & Associates, it's definitely worthwhile. So Tony's going to talk about the 10 biggest mistakes that people make in interviewing. Tony, thank you for being with us.
It's always a pleasure, Jeff. You're kind to do it, and we really appreciate what you're doing for the community.
Thank you very much.
You ready for me to begin?
All yours.
Oh, all right, great. How did I get my screen up?
Hover over the very bottom.
All right.
You're going to hit share screen again.
Share screen. All right.
Then pick the PowerPoint that's the presentation one.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
All right. See, I have to walk through this stuff. All right. We're going to briefly discuss the top 10 mistakes that people make in an initial interview, and then we'll take any questions that you might have. I've prepared this for a number of different venues, so we'll go through some of these really quickly. Let's see here. There we go. I've been doing this since 1973. I've personally placed more than 11,000 candidates on a one-on-one basis. I've probably gotten more than 100,000 people interviews in that period of time. I've written 4 best-selling books on how to find a job. We have a 60-hour online program that we recently rewrote called thejobsearchsolution.com. I didn't mention this to Jeff because I was technically incompetent, but we're offering a code through Jeff that you can get a discount on the job search solution. It's a 60-hour program of everything you ever wanted to know about how to find a job. I mean, everything you can imagine. And after the program today, if you write Jeff, I'll send him the code and he'll send you the code. And if you want to go through the job search solution, It'll give you a $15 discount on the program itself for just showing up. I am the president of Babich and Associates. We are the oldest placement and recruitment firm in the state of Texas, probably in the Southwest. We do everything that you can imagine except healthcare. We don't do any healthcare. We do banking, finance, accounting, sales, you name it, we do it. 99% of what we do is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, some Austin, some Houston. So the mistakes that people make in the interviewing process, these are simple mistakes and they're simple to deal with. The first biggest mistake is that they think that they forget that an initial interview, especially all interviews, but especially the initial one, is a selling situation. So many candidates come to me with the idea of they think it's a consumer product. They are looking to, well, what do they want and how do they want it and who do they want it with, instead of recognizing that what they need to do is be selling themselves. And I tell people all the time, you sell yourself until you get to the altar. Until then, nothing matters. And until you get a job offer, nothing matters. So the idea that I'm buying and I have to be concerned about what I'm going to get out of the deal doesn't mean a darn thing until you sell yourself. If you give them enough good reasons of why they ought to hire you, they're going to give you plenty of good reasons of why you ought to go to work there. And if you have it in your head that you're selling all of the time, you won't have a problem. The second issue is, oops, the wrong direction. The second one is people have a tendency to think that this is a two-way street. I heard it this morning from a candidate. Well, it's a two-way street. It's not a two-way street. There's the hiring authority, and in this market, there's an average of 14 candidates that are all trying to get the same job you are. It is not a two-way street. It's a 14-way street. Until you get to the altar, it's not a two-way street. Now, once you get to the altar and you want to try to exchange nuptials and try to get together, then it becomes, what can you do for me in the process? But until then, it's not a two-way street. If you give enough good reasons of why they ought to hire you, they're going to give you plenty of good reasons of why you ought to go to work there, and you can worry about that later. I had a candidate the other day, even after my coaching and my teaching, sometimes I wonder, what the heck? But he goes to the interview and he's halfway through the interview and he says, by the way, what does it pay? Yeah, he already knew what it paid because I told him, but he wanted to hear it. He said, well, I just wanted to hear it from the, no. What they can do for you questions, forget them. They're going to answer all of those once they have an idea that they want to hire you. Oops, I'll get this right in a minute. Okay, people have a tendency to focus on what they want in a job. Don't worry about what you want in a job. You got to focus on what the employer wants in the job. If you give an employer what he wants or she wants, then they're going to tell you what they can do for you. If you don't like what they can do for you, you don't have to take the job. We say it here all the time. You can't turn down an offer you don't have. Quit focusing on what you want. I get candidates all of the time and I ask them, what are you looking for in an opportunity? And my goodness, they'll have a litany of things that they want. But then when I ask them, well, what are you going to do for a prospective employer? Well, I'm a good employee and and they hadn't thought of that. And that's the most important thing they ought to be thinking about, not what they want in a job, but what does the employer want in the job? And then the fourth mistake is they don't know what they're really selling. I can't tell you the number of candidates I've interviewed over the years where I say, okay, now what are you selling to a prospective employer? Well, I'm a good employee. I'm just a good employee. Well, how do you know you're a good employee? Well, everybody I've ever worked for said they really like me. Well, yeah, but what specifically are you going to be able to do for them that the other people they're going to interview can't? Well, I have to think about that. Yeah, you really do have to think about that. And you've got to come down to absolute specifics. And I tell people you've got, in fact, I told this to an employer yesterday, the hiring authority is so wrapped up in his process of interviewing, they're going through 5 different kinds of interviews, that the hiring authority is forgetting to look at the candidate's track record. And what the candidate has got to sell is, I have been successful in my past. Here is where I have been successful, and therefore I'm going to be successful for you. And the more specific that a candidate is about where his successes have been, in fact, I recommend the more numbers that you can associate with your success. I increased sales, I collected debt, I somehow come up with as much as many statistical uh, um, issues as to why and how you've been successful, something that's measurable, something that I'm just a good employee, that doesn't tell people anything. If you say, I haven't missed a day of work in 14 years, and I've gone the extra mile because I volunteered for this committee and we got this done. The more you quantify things, the better off you're going to be. So you got to know what you're selling. And Jeff brought up something earlier that is really important, that you got to practice this stuff. It does not come naturally. And I teach it in our job search solution program, and I know Jeff does too, and your all's program does, but you've got to have a lip load of presentations of every job you've had, what you've done, how successful you were, and then communicate the idea that it's going to also be successful for them because you've been successful in the past. The 5th mistake is they can't bridge or articulate for the employer their specific abilities. Rarely are you ever going to run into a job that's exactly like the job you've had. So you have to bridge for the hiring authority. I claim that you've got to make the bridge for them, but you got to do their thinking for them. You've got to be able to say, now look, I was successful in this job. Here's what made me successful in that job. And from what I understand, what you are looking for or you need in the job you're interviewing for are the kind of skills that I have. Here is where I've done it before. And you've got to make that bridge for them. You've got to articulate not just what you've done, but how it applies to what they want done, and literally do their thinking for them. The 6th mistake, poor communication skills. I'm not sure. I don't know. Poor body language, not leaning forward in your chair, not animating enough in the right way. We have a whole course on this in our job search solution. I can't tell you the number of candidates I've seen lose out in deals because of their very poor body language. And it's not because they're sloppy, it's because they're scared. Look, next to death of a spouse, death of a parent, death of a child, coupled with divorce, the 4th most emotional thing we do is look for a job. And it often shows up in the interviewing process. They slouch, they don't speak clearly, they mumble, they don't look people in the eye. And I realize in many professions, it's not common to, I mean, you can get away without looking people in the eye. But in the interviewing process, you can't do that. And as we mentioned earlier, you got to practice this stuff. It does not come naturally, but those communication skills have to be strong. They don't necessarily have to be animated, and they don't necessarily have to be forceful. It's nice if they are, but just as long as you communicate and you make sure that you're communicating the right kind of thing. Answers to questions can be short, and answers to questions could be right to the point, but they have to be the right answers. And it has to come across as interested and professional. And over the past few years, lots of dressing and dressing differently. When I got in this business, everything was coat and tie. It is in our organization too. Every day, coat and tie. But things have changed a little bit, but still slouching and not speaking clearly and mumbling and that kind of thing. People will get lost in the manner in which you speak more than the matter of what you do. Seventh mistake is improper dress and poor body language. I mentioned this a little bit ago. Don't assume everybody's casual. Don't assume that just because I had a candidate show up in a coat and tie, a dress, a suit, and I'll be darned if the guy that was interviewing him wasn't wearing flip-flops and cutoffs. That doesn't matter. You go dressed like you're looking to borrow $1 million. Is somebody going to lend you $1 million? Even if you overdress, it's better to overdress than it is to underdress. And even to this day, I've had candidates go in with a golf shirt this happened the other day. Guy goes in with a golf shirt that was checkered or something. I don't know. The employer said, and then he had a sport coat over it, and it just looked terrible. It looked like the guy just had the sport coat hung up in his car, and didn't matter what he was wearing. He just put the sport coat on. The hiring authority was so distracted by that, he claimed that the candidate was disrespectful because he didn't dress the right way, and it got in the way of the quality of the candidate, because he was actually a pretty good candidate. And he said, well, his excuse was, well, when I even go into the office now, even though we used to work from home. And if I go in dressed like I'm looking for an interview, or like I'm looking for a job, they'll know. So well, okay, fine. But if you're going to do that, explain to a hiring authority, look, I came from work. We dress casually there. You can dress casually in a nicer way where it doesn't look so weird as it looked in this particular case. And the hiring authority was so distracted by the whole thing, he never heard what the candidate had to say. And this was a 15-year experienced guy. So it wasn't some kid right out of school. The eighth mistake is not researching the company or the position that a person's interviewing for. You would think with all of the information that we have available to us, LinkedIn, the internet, I mean, my goodness, there's more information out there than you can possibly imagine. I am shocked that even after I teach candidates or sell the idea of do your research on the company and the person you're interviewing and all of that, it's just amazing that people just show up and say, well, I just really haven't had time to go and look the research up, but tell me, what do you do here? And I'm talking professional people that have been around for a while. Look, if you don't show enough interest in the opportunity to do the research on the job and the person that's in it, I've had candidates that have called people in the company to find out about the job, connected with other people that have worked there before. I had a candidate not too long ago. He had read some white papers that the company published. He knew more about the white papers of what the company had published than the guy that was doing the interviewing. And the guy that was doing the interviewing was pretty impressed by that. He said, I learned a lot about my company from your candidate. The guy did the research. It's not that hard to do. It doesn't take all that long, but you just don't look very interested in what you're applying for if you don't do that kind of thing. The ninth mistake is the inability to articulate what you'd like to see in a new job. Now, I'm not talking about money and benefits and parking and PTO and all of that. No. I'm talking about when somebody asks you, what are you looking for in a job? It's very important for a candidate to come up with intrinsic growth. I'm looking to grow intellectually, spiritually, intrinsically in an opportunity. I'd like to learn more. I'd like to be pressed a little bit. I find in some of the jobs that I've had before, I learned them and I didn't grow personally. You need to be able to communicate where you want to grow personally in a job. Because the truth is, if you're not growing on the inside, intellectually, from your heart, spiritually, in a situation, you'll, after a while, not very interested in the opportunity, and you won't work very hard. Kind of people that are most successful are the kind of people that figure out how to grow mentally and spiritually in their job. And so you need a couple of answers to that. What I'm looking for in a job is an opportunity to grow spiritually and mentally, and I want to be challenged. And from what I understand from talking around and doing my research, people can do that here in this kind of organization. That's why I want to be a part of it. And then the 10th mistake, they badmouth their present employer or their past employer. And common sense would tell you that you don't do that. Okay. But I guess common sense, even after 47 years of doing this, common sense isn't very common. I just can't, and I warn candidates because when I interview them, they'll say, my company is this and my boss is that. And I realize there are a lot of screwball companies out there. There are a lot of screwball people out there. But you don't go in and talk about your past employer in any other way other than, I really respect the people that I work for. I've enjoyed the opportunity. I've certainly learned a lot. Here are the reasons that I'm looking to leave, and they better be good business reasons. But bad mouthing your employer, saying negative things about them, a hiring authority is going to think and assume that whatever you say about the people you've worked for before, you're going to eventually say about them. So no matter how horrific your situation might be, unless they've stolen money from you, and even then, I'd be careful about that, always have something positive to say. One of my associates here calls it a compliment sandwich. You say something positive about them, and then you give them a reason that is reasonable that you might be leaving for, and then another positive statement so that you couch whatever your reasons you are looking to leave in a positive way rather than a bad mouth way. And then there are also some things that you gotta, these are kind of minor. Discussing personal problems in an interview. Well, I'm looking to leave because I'm going through a terrible divorce, or I'm suing my last employer. I had a candidate just last week. The interview was going so well, and he said to the hiring authority, "Well, I had to sue my last employer for the money that they owed me." Ah, end of interview. What do you think an employer is going to think about that? And this guy, what's so funny about it is he threatened to sue him. He never really did sue him. He's still at the same place that he was. He threatened him a year earlier. But do you think an employer wants to hear something like that? They don't. Being late for an interview, if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you got to know that wherever you're going to drive to, you got to get there a half hour earlier because we don't build up, we build out. And this is flat. And LBJ is crazy. The toll road is crazy. Every place you drive to is crazy. You got to be there early. And I even have candidates that drive to the place the night before just to be sure that they can get there. And don't necessarily rely on Google Maps. It can take you the wrong place and then you're late. And then, of course, once you're late, not apologizing for being late. I bet this happens even with my candidates, and I deal with professional salespeople, semi-professional salespeople, and that they'll show up late and they won't apologize. I mean, you wouldn't do that anywhere. And now, don't go overboard. If you go in and go, "Oh my God, I'm late. I'm so sorry I'm late," and all you do is talk about being late, you'll go overboard with it, but apologize for being late. Not closing the interview properly. We've talked about this on this program before, but there are 4 basic questions you have to ask in every interview. They are, first of all, have I made it very clear what my experience and my background is? Does anybody have any questions about what I've done and where I've done it? Lots of people will act like they know what you're talking about in an interviewing situation, but they don't understand. They don't want to appear ignorant, so they'll act like they understand. You'll walk out of the door and then they'll go, I didn't really understand what the guy was talking about. So you ask, are there any clarifications I need to make about my experience or my background? Secondly, how does my experience and background stack up with what you're looking for? If I'm in your shoes, what strengths and what weaknesses might I have? Do you have any concerns about my ability to do the job? And then number 4, how do I stack up with the other candidates that you've interviewed? And get a really good idea and stop. And then the 4th one and most important one, what do I need to do to get the job? Now, I get candidates all the time that say, well, what if I don't want the job? You don't know whether you want the job or not until you get an offer. We had a candidate not too long ago that went into an interview for a controller's position. The job paid $175,000. He sold himself so well, they offered him $275,000. So you got to do it right and sell it right. Those 4 basic questions, they're killer questions. They are ones that you absolutely have to ask in order to get the job. And if you do a good job of that, if nothing else, you know exactly how you stand. So those are the 10 biggest mistakes that people make. There's a much broader presentation about this in the jobsearchsolution.com. So, any questions?
Yes, Daniel, why don't you unmute your mic and I'll let you ask your question.
Yeah, sure. So when I do company research, I can find a lot of general information about the company, but sometimes I want to ask specifically, like, so what does your team do? What's kind of the specific focus you're doing beyond the job description? Is that going to make me look like I haven't prepared well, or is there a good way to ask that?
No, that's not a bad way to ask it. You got to put it in context. It depends on how many other questions you might have, the rapport that you might be having with the interviewing authority or that kind of thing. That's a fair question, because no matter what anybody publishes on their website or no matter what anybody tells you, even in the lobby, there's always going to be a hidden lots going on in the company that you may not know about. That's a reasonable question. That's a reasonable question.
All right, thank you.
John's asking, can you please restate the 4 questions at the end of the interview that you want to ask again?
Sure. And the job search solution goes into these things in real detail. But the first one is, have I made it clear about what my experience is? And do you have any questions about my experience or background that I didn't make clear? Interestingly enough, although the other 3 are more pointed, that is probably one of the best questions you can ask, because I'll tell you, when people are asking you questions, they spend, I don't know, but it's probably 50% of their time thinking about the next question rather than what your answer is. I know employers that I work with that don't even take notes on the candidates they interview. I mean, that's crazy. You interview a candidate 2 weeks ago, unless you take copious notes, you don't remember who you talked to. You just don't. So lots of times you'll explain what you do and you think you've communicated, well, they know what I've done, but they don't. And you got to ask them, have I made it clear? So are there any questions about my experience and my background that I need to elaborate on? And I guarantee you, there's going to be one of those people in that group or one person that's going to say, yeah, this job you had two jobs ago, I don't really understand what you did there. Can you explain it to me? So that's really an important question. Then the second question is, do you have any concerns about my ability to do the job? Now, what you're going to find out there is, how are you stacking up? Are you long in some areas and short in other areas? Do you have, do they have any concerns? I had a candidate this morning. She asked that question, and it was a Zoom interview. And the group that she asked it with, one of them said, well, it doesn't appear in your background. I place primarily IT salespeople. It doesn't appear anywhere in your background where you've done financial application demos. And she said, oh, yes, I have. Well, part of their job is, as a salesperson in this company, is to be able to do WebEx demos. And this guy didn't get the idea that she had done that before. I guarantee you the other 3 people in that interview didn't get that idea either. If he didn't get it, they didn't get it. And so she was able to say, yes, in this job I had, and she pointed out the job she had. She said, I didn't even understand the software, and I learned it within a couple of 3 weeks of how to demo it. So asking that question about where am I strong and where am I weak is basically what you're doing. And then, how do I stack up with the other candidates that you've interviewed? Most employers don't know how to answer that question because they never get asked it. You would be surprised. You would be really surprised. I had a candidate ask that the other day, and they said, I don't know, you're the first one we've talked to. Okay, that's fair enough. But at least they'll give you an idea of how you stack up and, about the other people that were talked. I had a candidate a couple weeks ago ask that, and they said to the candidate, well, your skills are really good. We do have an internal candidate that we really like. Well, now what that tells the candidate is that an internal candidate most of the time always has an advantage because they know the person. They probably aren't as good as the candidates that, frankly, this sounds self-serving, that I can come up with. I can probably come up with better candidates than what they have internally, but they know the person. So my candidate knew then that he was up against an internal candidate he was going to have a hard time fighting that battle. And then the last one, and just real blunt, what do I need to do to get the job? And you'll be shocked at the number of people that you ask that of, that they just start laughing and they go, man, that's a good question. Nobody seems to ask that question. Now, the irony to all of this is I give people my job search solution, and out of 4, on average, out of 4 candidates, even though I teach it, only one of them asks all of those 4 questions. I don't get it. I just don't understand. You need a job. I'm telling you some of the things you need to do to get it, and only 1 out of 4 asks it. And when I ask the other 3, why didn't you ask? Well, it just didn't seem appropriate. Well, I wasn't quite sure. Well, we ran out of time, blah, 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 blah. What it means is you just didn't have the courage to find out, where do you stand? Look, when you're looking for a job, no is the second best answer you can get. If you're not going to hire my candidate, let me know now. The sooner you let me know. I may not agree with it. I may not like it, but at least I know. No is no. That means we move on to the next one. Yes, no, those are great. It's that maybe that kills you. And that's where people spend most of, even I do, after all these years, spend the emotional time and effort in that maybe. So, and if you're not a candidate, that's fine. Find out quickly.
Great. Sarah Ann, do you want to ask your question? You want to unmute your mic and let you ask your question?
It's that age-old question of they want you to talk about salary before they tell you what the range is. So how do you eloquently skirt around that?
Great question. Get asked that all the time. Here's what I would say as a candidate. In the past, in my last job or my present job, I'm presently making or I've made X amount of dollars. I'm not as concerned about the amount of money as I'm concerned about the opportunity, the growth, and the people. So tell them what you've been earning, but don't say, this is what I'm looking for or this is what I need. Now, there are some, this is a paradox and this is screwball, but in the state of California, and I'm not sure if it's true in New York, but I know in the state of California, you can't ask people what they've been making when they're in the interview. Now, after you go to hire them, you can find out what they've been making. Now, that's stupid because if they've been making more than totally a lot more than what you're going to pay, then they're not going to get hired anyhow. So, you know, I've had candidates, I say, what have you been making? And they say, I don't want to tell you. End of interview, as far as I'm concerned. That's not going to fly. They may have reasons for doing it. They may not want me to know. Usually it's because they feel like they've been grossly underpaid. That has nothing to do with it. It has to do with, if I ask that question, I'm, in my opinion, in my business, I'm going to have to tell my client because they're going to ask me. And the candidates in the same thing. So don't tell them necessarily what you're looking for. Just say, this is what I've made in the past, but I'm flexible. If I've been out of work 6 months, I'm real flexible. If I've been out of work a year, I'm really, really, really flexible. If I'm on my present job and I'm leaving for maybe different reasons, I may not be as flexible, but they don't need to know that. This is what I've earned in the past. I'm open to the future. Whatever you do, and some guru I listen to stuff all the time on the internet about getting a job, and some yahoo was on there was saying that when you get asked that question, don't answer it, just ask the question, well, what does a job pay? Ugh. Any question that has to do with what are you going to do for me is a stupid question. Please don't do it.
So I've got a question for you. So of all the placements that you all make, that Babbage makes, what percentage of jobs do you already know what the salary is so you can prep the candidate when you're sending them in?
99% of them we know, and we're able to give them an idea what the range is. Sometimes people listen, sometimes they don't. And we try to make it reasonable for the candidate, and the employer knows that we're going to do that. Sometimes employers tell us wrong. You know, people, I read it in a book not too long ago, because I'm reading this kind of stuff all the time, that companies are going to publish the mid-range of the salary. That's not necessarily true. I mean, they're going to publish whatever they publish. Just handle it by being just careful. You're going to have, most of the time, somewhat of an idea before you go in. What you don't want to do is price yourself out of the opportunity, because there might be some really growth there. If money was the most important thing that people worked for, we'd all sell cocaine. You know, I mean, it's ridiculous. So you answer the question by, this is what I've made in the past, but I'm interested in growth, and then stop.
Okay. Leslie, do you want to ask your question?
Okay. So I wanted to know what kind of an answer could I expect from asking, what do I need to do to get the job? I had no idea. What are they going to say? Are they going to say, you need to do this, this, and this, and do 3 leapfrogs? I had no idea.
Yeah. Pat your head, rub your belly, and sing the national anthem. No, the issue, don't worry about the answer. The answer isn't anywhere near as important as the fact that you asked the question. They may not even have an answer. It's going to be an answer of some like, well, we've got 22 other candidates. I'm being facetious. We've got a few other candidates that we're going to talk to. We feel like that you have provided us all the information that we need, but we appreciate your asking. And then you can even come back. Is there anything else I can do to enhance my position? The fact that you had the guts to ask it and that you're willing to say, you're going to hire me or not, puts you in a light that is more courageous than most candidates. Most people are afraid somebody's going to say, nah, you're not going to get hired here anyhow. Well, okay, fine. You know, I mean, you're going to get 14 to 15 no's before you get a yes anyhow.
Just another little story in the pit crew. We had a candidate once who and he came back and told us that after the interview or during the interview at the very end, he said, you know, I saw that empty desk out there. Would that be my desk? And the guy sort of like chuckled from it. And actually he did get the job because he took it to the next step.
I had a candidate one time that interviewed with the CEO. It's now $1 billion company. And the CEO said, it was not that big at the time, we'll let you know. And he one Monday morning, he showed up, went to one of the empty desks, opened up his briefcase, set his whole desk up. The CEO walks in and says, who's that guy? And the admin told him, she said, he's your new hire. He said, oh, okay, I guess so. Guy was there 15 years. He never really got offered the job. He took the job. Now, that's pretty gutsy, but you know, he made their decision for him. He wound up being a really good guy for the company. It takes guts. I don't know that I'd recommend that, but I mean, what's the worst? They throw you out? I mean, you know, so what?
Right. Any other questions? We've got time for a couple more. If anybody has anything, welcome to unmute your mic.
Can you repeat question number 2
Sure.
from the 4 questions?
Okay.
Thanks.
Do you have any concerns about my ability to do this job? Now that's different than the first question. The first question has to do with, do you have any concerns about my experience or in my background? Have I made it clear what I've done before? That gives them a chance to ask any questions about what you might have done before that they don't, that they were unsure of, that they were unclear. Can't tell you the number of times I've had candidates come out of interviews and the employer, when I followed up with him, he didn't really understand what the candidate did. Not recently, but 2 or 3 jobs before. So you give them a chance to do that. The second question of, do you have any concerns about my ability to do the job? That gives them a chance to say, you're strong or you're weak here. Or like the lady this morning, we can't tell if you've had experience. It was something along the line of, do you know how to do demos? I don't see anything in your background that says you know how to do demos. Well, one of the things these people do is demos. And that was the only concern that they had, and she was able to counteract that. So you're asking, do you have any concerns about my ability to do the job? My shortcomings, my strengths, or whatever. And then that way, you might, now people may not say anything at the time. They may say, no, really don't. But oftentimes they might tell you, well, look, we want somebody to do A, B, and C, and we can't see in your background where you've done that. And it gives you a chance to explain where you've done it. Does that make sense?
It does to me. John, do you have a question?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Go ahead,
So
John.
Tony, I know you talked a little bit about the whole salary thing. I understand that. Oftentimes they'll say, even they did yesterday, what range are you looking for in compensation? So you're right away, even though you try to do research, you can price yourself in or out of a job. So are you still saying I should say what I did make in the past to kind of go that direction?
Yeah. Look, that's the least of all evils. I'm not saying
Right.
I'm not saying there's a right answer. It's just, it's the least of all evils.
Right.
And it depends on, you know, and please, whatever you do, don't go by salary um, don't go on the internet and look up what people make. I had a candidate the other day, God bless him. I realized he was sincere, but he said, well, I went on the internet and I found out that people that with my amount of experience are making, I don't know, whatever he said. And he said, and that's $10,000 more than I've been making. And I feel like I've been cheated. No. Stay away from that. I would just fall. And then I would fall back on saying, look, money is just one of the aspects of what I'm looking for. And what I do and how I'm compensated. And it depends on a whole lot of other things. I might work for less money at one place because I might feel like I'm growing in one direction or there's opportunity. I'm not really that worried about money. Lots of other things are just as important.
Right. And I understand a hiring manager may need to know if they could afford a person. So I get it. The recruiter has to go back with something. I get it. Okay.
I always like the term fair and equitable. I'm sure that whatever your company's going to pay is fair and equitable.
Yeah. Because that's not a bad way to put it. Anything that deflects it a little bit so you don't price yourself out of it. That's all you want to do.
If you want to have fun, there's a guy, Steve Zipkoff, who does a lot of talks around the community. He says his funny term is, he says, well, my manufactured suggested retail price is $120,000 a year. Now I can't work for free and nobody pays full price. So I'm sure that whatever we can work out something that's fair and equitable.
That's pretty good.
You make them laugh. If you can get them to laugh.
Yeah. I had a candidate that he was negotiating about a 400 grand job, and the base was going to be 2. And he put in the list of things, if you pay me 2, this is what I'll do. And the 5th one down was, he said, I'll have my twin boys come over and wash your car every Saturday. I mean, and the CEO had to laugh. He didn't hire, well, he ended up hiring somebody else, but add a little levity to the thing and don't take yourself too seriously. So those are good ways of doing it. Yeah.
Right. Any other question? Yeah, go ahead, Raul.
It is okay to ask the recruiter about the salary range assigned to the position if you don't have any offer and you don't have any question about salary before. It's okay to go back and go to the recruiter. Do you know the salary range?
Sure. If it's an internal recruiter or an external recruiter, you can certainly ask them what's the range they gave you. But I had a CEO the other day tell me, and this is because we're having a hassle over it. He told me that the base salary was anywhere from 125 grand to 175 grand. And I said, damn, that's a big difference. 125, 175. I mean, that's $50,000 difference in base salary. He said, look, we're going to pay whatever we need to do to get the guy or gal. By the time the vice president got involved in the deal, he comes to the point where he wants to offer a guy a job. He said, we pay everybody $125,000 base salary. That's what we do. We don't pay any more than that.
Okay.
So unfortunately, I don't think people do it on purpose, but they lie.
Right. All right. Well,
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
One more question. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I had a question about next steps, interview closing questions. Do you have any recommendation about how to ask those?
Sure. Depending on the answer you get from what do I need to do to get the job, I have some candidates that soften that by say, what's the next step? I don't like that because what they say is, well, the next step is we're going to have people back and we're going to do this and that and the other thing. Well, okay, then you might ask, how do I be certain that I'm going to be one of those? Okay. And look, you might as well be aggressive. Most candidates aren't. And they call me back and they say, well, they told me that the next steps are they're having people back next Tuesday. Well, are you going to be one of them? Well, I don't know. Well, know where you stand. And, what do I need to do to get the job? What are the other steps in the process? And am I going to be in, and you can say it nicely with a smile on your face, am I going to be in that group that comes back to speak with you all?
Great. All right, Michael, you get the last question.
Okay, Tony, I'd be interested in your comments on situations where your past employer has asked you to do some things that are legally questionable, especially in my profession, which is accounting.
Yes.
And when you're interviewing with somebody, they're going to probably expect to be able to talk to your most recent employer as a reference, but you can't go there because of that illegal situation. How do you handle that?
Boy, that is an excellent question. It does not apply to a lot of people, but boy, when it applies to you, it's a booger bear. Here's what I would explain. In my last situation, one of the reasons that I left was that my employer asked me to do something that was, in my opinion, illegal and immoral. And this is exactly what they asked me to do. They asked me to keep 2 sets of books. I have people that I work with that can testify to the fact that I was asked to keep 2 separate set of books. But if you call my previous employer, he is not likely to give me a good reference. I understand what he was trying to do. I couldn't agree with it. It goes against my profession and my morality. I think the important thing there is to explain exactly what you were asked to do. It's one thing to say, my employer asked me to do something that I really didn't want to do. But if you don't explain it, the employer's thinking, well, what if you asked you to park in the parking lot and you just didn't want to walk that far? Or what? Well, now you got to remember, this is really important to remember, and I should have thrown it in somewhere in here. People are looking for just as many reasons not to hire you as they are reasons to hire you. So you want to try to give them as few reasons not to hire you, as few reasons of not to hire you as you can. So in a case like that, you say, my past employer asked me to cook the books. I didn't feel comfortable in doing it. I left, but the previous employer to that, I did this, I did this, I did this, and you're welcome to check with all of them. But be specific about what you were asked to do that you couldn't do, and try to have somebody that will support your doing that, which is really not that hard, because if they're asking you to do that, they're asking other people to cheat too.
Mm-hmm. So bring it up, even if topics in the interview don't point in that direction.
Yeah, even if you left a company or were released because you were asked to do something immoral or illegal, you got to tell the prospective employer, because if they check with that previous employer, they're going to say, yeah, I asked Michael, we told Michael he had to have some stuff done and he refused to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Tony, would you wait and not bring that up until like you're like a finalist, or like they're saying, can you send us your references?
Yes, I wouldn't bring it up in an initial interview unless I was asked.
Mm-hmm.
And why'd you leave your last job? Because it's going to come out. It just depends. The closer you get to the number, if you get a second, third, and fourth interview and you feel like that you're becoming a candidate they're really interested in, and it comes up, then it's easier for you to say that. But if it's in the very initial interview, you got to come up with a short lip load, and you got to make it short, sweet, to the point, and then drop it.
Right.
All right. Thank you. Tony, are you open to people sending you LinkedIn invitations?
On any day that ends in Y. You bet. And
All right,
if you're looking for a position, send me your resume. By the way, get a hold of Jeff. We'll give you a discount code for the job search solution if you're interested in it. And we'd love to help in any way we can.
Right. So you can reach out to Tony. Tony's with Babbage and Associates. It's one of the good, I believe, one of the good recruiting firms in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Well,
All
it's
right.
nice of Jeff to say that. We've been very blessed with people like Jeff.
Yeah, well, I'm very thankful for you being in the club of wanting to help job seekers. Besides being your business, you're willing to come and do this, pro bono, and I really
Sure,
appreciate that.
no problem.
All right, well, next week we're going to talk about behavioral interviewing. So Paul Walsh will be with us. He's actually a job seeker right now, but he specializes in behavioral interviews. So we'll talk about that. We'll go into some details. So join us next Wednesday at 1 o'clock. We're putting on training 5 days a week now. So networking on Monday, LinkedIn on Tuesday, interviewing on Wednesday, effective resumes on Thursday. The North Dallas Plano Crew focus group is meeting on Friday. Tomorrow for effective resume Thursday, we're going to have a special guest speaker. A lot of you know Andy Cook. She has a radio show on Tuesday evenings. She'll be with us to share her resume tips and tricks. This Friday at the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group, we'll be talking about, is consulting right for you? Things to think about. If you're a woman and you have wisdom, you're welcome to join the Women of Wisdom group. They meet the first and third Fridays of each month. It's by invitation only. You do need to send an invitation to wow@careerdfw.org. The reason they want that is they're not looking to have 50 people because it's a very interactive group and they're trying to keep it down to around 20, 25 people at the most. Next Monday for Networking Mondays, our guest speaker will be Jack Bick. He's going to talk about power networking, how to create a network in 5 days. And then on Tuesday, Kurt Vondermatter, who's a retained recruiter, will be with us to talk about LinkedIn from a recruiter's eye. He's going to show us LinkedIn. He pays that $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 a year to LinkedIn for the full-blown package. And he'll show us what it looks like from the back end and what he's looking for when he's trying to find you as a candidate. And then don't forget next week, next Wednesday, Paul Walsh will be with us to talk about behavioral interviewing. We'll start up our 13-part workshop again on May 5th. So the months of May, June, and July, we will hopefully we'll be putting on the 13-part workshop again. This session has been recorded. You'll be able to go back and review it as often as you like. It'll be on the Career DFW Facebook page and on the Career USA YouTube channel. Please follow us on Facebook. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Usually it takes a couple hours for this to get up to the YouTube channel. Don't forget, there's a lot of great information in the chat box. You may want to copy the chat box and save it to your local computer so you can copy some of that information off. Here's the YouTube channel. This is what it looks like. You want to make sure you click on playlist where the green arrow is. And then down below, don't click on the video, but look for the topic that you want. And then where the red arrow is, where it says view full playlist, click on that. And then up will come a listing from the most recent video posted that you can go back and you can scroll down and find the topic that you're looking for. If you're not receiving emails about our workshops, we put out 6 or 7 emails a week. The email every day when it comes out will have the Zoom link for that day and the topic that we're talking about. If you're not getting our emails, please join the Career USA mailing list. You can send an email to Career USA, the +, subscribe at groups.io. You will never get spam because I control it and I'm the only one who can send out emails from that group. So it'll just be what we're doing on a daily basis. Please remember, Career DFW, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We have no full or part-time employees. Like we mentioned, Tony volunteered to speak with us today. All of our speakers volunteer. None of our speakers get paid to do this. I don't get paid to do this. This is my charity that I've done for the last 12 and a half years to give back to the Dallas-Fort Worth and now around the country to help job seekers. We survive on donations. It helps pay for Zoom. It helps pay for web names, web hostings, and anything I can't get donated. So when you get your next great opportunity, please consider making a donation so we can continue to provide the services that we're providing every day. So thank you very much for joining us today. Have a great week, and hopefully we'll see you later on. And Tony, once again, thank you for your time.
Thank you all very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and we appreciate everything you're doing, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you all.